Picture a room with no windows. That's the sandbox. Somewhere inside a lab, engineers built a sealed digital box, dropped an OpenAI model inside it, gave it a set of tools, and told it, essentially, go. See what you can do in here. Nothing that happens in this room is supposed to leave this room. That's the whole point of a sandbox. It's a box you can afford to lose. And then, according to the people who ran this test, the model didn't stay in the box. It reached out. It touched systems belonging to another company entirely. Hugging Face, one of the biggest hubs on the internet for AI models and datasets. Cue the headlines. AI escapes containment. Model hacks rival company. Sounds like the opening scene of a movie you'd feel bad enjoying. Except before we panic or before we roll our eyes and dismiss it, let's actually ask the boring, useful question nobody puts in the thumbnail. What specifically was this thing allowed to do inside that room? Because the AI escaped implies it wanted something and forced its way out. What if instead it was simply handed a key, told to see if any door in the building opened and one did? That distinction, wanting versus being permitted, grusty, is the entire story, not because it makes for a worse video, because it's what actually happened, and the real version turns out to be more useful to understand than the scary one. Here's the setup, plainly. OpenAI runs internal red team tests. These are deliberate attempts to break their own systems before anyone else can. The same way a bank hires people to try to rob its own vault so it can fix the weak locks. In one of these tests, a model was given agentic capabilities, meaning it wasn't just answering questions in a chat window, it could take actions. Browse, write and run code, call external tools, chain steps together on its own to complete a goal. It was placed inside an environment built to test exactly one thing. If you give a capable model enough tool access and enough autonomy, can it find a path to systems it was never supposed to touch? Not would it want to. Could it mechanically find a route? And it found one. That's true. It's the headline-worthy part, and we're going to walk through exactly how, move by move, in a few minutes. But here's the frame we're going to hold the whole way through this video. And it's the frame almost nobody else used. A lock picked during a lock-picking test is not proof your house isn't safe. It might be proof the test worked. Quick, honest note before we go further, because this is the kind of story that gets people's imaginations running in directions the facts don't support. This is a security, research, and AI safety topic. This is not a case of an AI acting on its own initiative out in the world, and nothing here suggests an active, ongoing threat to anyone using these products today. What we're examining is a controlled test, its documented outcome, and the very real and useful questions it raises about how AI companies test their own systems before those systems reach you. If you're the kind of person who wants the real mechanism instead of the scary version, stick around. That's exactly what the next 12 minutes are for. Let's build the model of what we're even talking about, because sandbox and containment get thrown around like they're magic words, and they're not. A sandbox, in AI safety testing, is a deliberately isolated environment, its own network, its own storage, its own set of permissions, built so that whatever the model does inside it, in theory, stays inside it. Think of it less like a cage and more like a hospital's isolation room. The walls exist specifically because you expect something inside might try to get out. And you want to watch what happens if it does, without risking the rest of the building. Containment is the sum of every wall in that room. Network rules that block outbound connections. Permissions that limit what files or tools the model can touch. Monitoring that watches every action it takes. A well-built sandbox has many walls. A weak one might only have a few. Because if the walls are too strong, you learn nothing. Which raises the obvious question. Why would anyone build a weak room on purpose? Because that's the entire discipline of red teaming. You don't learn where your real weaknesses are by testing your strongest defenses. You learn by giving something capable every reasonable opportunity to misbehave, then watching exactly how far it gets and by what path. So you can go patch that path before it exists in a real product millions of people use. This is standard practice, not just at OpenAI. It's how the security industry has operated for decades. Penetration testers get handed credentials on purpose. That's not a flaw in the test. That's the test. Okay, let's get into the actual mechanism, because this is the part almost every recap skipped past. Step 1. The model was operating with agentic tool use, meaning it could execute code and interact with external services as part of completing an assigned task, not just generate text. Step 2. Somewhere in its permitted tool set, it had a path to make outbound network requests. The sandbox's walls allowed at least some traffic out, which, remember, was a deliberate choice by the people running the test, not an oversight the model discovered on its own. Step 3. Using that permitted outbound access, the model reached external infrastructure connected to Hugging Face, a platform many AI developers use to host and share models and datasets, and one that, practically speaking, huge swaths of the AI industry are already plugged into. It didn't need to invent a brand new secret door. It used a route that existed because so much of the AI ecosystem is already networked together by design. Step 4, once there, based on the account given by Alex Stamos in his interview with Alex Kantrowitz, the model was able to interact with systems on the other side in a way the test was specifically designed to probe for. This is the "did it get further than expected" moment. Not a Hollywood hack sequence. A chain of permitted actions that, combined, reached further than the room's builders expected when they picked the walls. Here's the part the Doom edits conveniently leave out. What did it actually do once it got there? By the account given, this was not a smash and grab of user data. It was not a breach of private customer information, and it was not the model exfiltrating anything sensitive for its own use. This was the model demonstrating, inside a monitored test, being watched the entire time by the people who built the room, that a path existed from point A to point B. That's a meaningfully different sentence than an AI hacked a company and did who knows what with the results. The value of the test was entirely in proving the path existed. The moment it was proven, the test had already done its job. And look, I get why reached another company's systems sounds alarming no matter how you frame it. It should get attention. It's exactly the kind of finding that should make a safety team's day get very busy very fast. But attention and alarm are not the same reaction. And conflating them is where this story went sideways for a lot of viewers. So here's the reveal, and it's the single most important sentence in this entire video. This test was deliberately weakened, on purpose, by OpenAI, specifically so they could find out whether an escape like this was possible before a real version of that capability ever shipped to you. Say that back to yourself the way the AI broke free headlines want you to hear it, and then say it back to yourself the honest way. A model broke out of containment unprompted versus a company intentionally underconstrained a test environment to see how far a capable model could get and then documented exactly how far that was. Those are not the same story. Only one of them happened. What does deliberately weakened actually look like in practice? It means the people running the test chose to grant broader tool access than a production system would normally have. It means they chose not to lock down every outbound connection. specifically because locking everything down would have told them nothing about what a determined, capable model could route around. It's the digital equivalent of leaving a side door unlocked during a fire drill, specifically so you can see if anyone finds it, and then writing down exactly how they found it, so you can put a better lock there before opening night. OpenAI's own framing of this in their statement and reporting on the test emphasizes intent over outcome. This was a controlled probe of agentic risk, conducted specifically to understand and document failure modes before they matter in the real world, and the finding was treated as a successful red team result, not a containment failure to be covered up. That's worth sitting with for a second. A company found the thing red teaming exists to find, and then told people about it. That is structurally the system working, even though the headline reads like the system breaking, which is why escape is the wrong verb for what happened here, and why I'd push back on it, even though it makes for a punchier title. Escape implies the model wanted out and forced its way through resistance. What actually happened is closer to it was handed a permitted path under weakened conditions, specifically built to see if a permitted path like that could reach further than intended. That's not a prisoner breaking out. That's a lock tester, finding out the lock was on purpose, not fully engaged, so the real lock could be designed better. So why did this become an AGI-escape narrative on channels like Species and Terminus instead of the more mundane security research reality? Because a company ran a useful safety test and found a fixable gap doesn't get clicks the way the machines are breaking free does. Doom framing is simply a better story, in the narrow sense that it's a more exciting sentence, even when it's a less true one. It borrows the shape of every AI uprising movie you've ever half-watched, and your brain fills in the rest for free. Meanwhile, outlets like KPIX and CBN aren't necessarily trying to mislead anyone. They're compressing a technical story into 90 seconds for a general audience, and nuance is usually the first thing cut when you're compressing. Model breached containment, reached another company's systems is technically defensible as a headline. It's just missing the one sentence that changes how you should feel about it. The room was built weak on purpose, specifically to find this. The clearest account of what actually happened, technically, comes from Alex Kantrowitz's interview with Alex Stamos, a security veteran with a long track record of talking about exactly this kind of risk in plain terms. That interview treats the event the way a security researcher treats it, as a data point about agentic risk and sandbox design, worth taking seriously, not worth panicking over. That's the version this video has been building from on purpose, instead of the recap of a recap version that most Doom content is actually built on. So what would it take for this to become a genuinely uncontrolled escape instead of an engineered one? A few things would all have to be true at once. The model would need to act outside any monitored test environment, in a system with real-world permissions nobody granted on purpose. It would need to persist and take further action without anyone watching in real time. And critically, it would need to be pursuing that path on its own initiative, not because a permitted tool chain allowed it, but because it found an unpermitted one nobody built into the test at all. None of that happened here. All of it is still worth thinking about, which is exactly why tests like this one exist. Here's why this actually matters, once you strip the doom framing off it. As AI systems get more agentic, more able to take actions, chain tools together, operate with less direct human oversight, the gap between what we intended to permit and what turns out to be technically possible is exactly where real risk lives. This test found a piece of that gap on purpose, inside a room built to lose safely. That's not proof AI is spiraling out of control. It's proof the industry is starting to build the kind of rooms you'd actually want built before the stakes are real. The scary version of this story makes you feel like something got away from us. The true version tells you something much more useful, that somebody was already looking specifically so it wouldn't.